Happy Monday to everyone who's joining us in the City Chambers and to those who are joining online. This is City Council. Roger, please.
Thank you, Lord Provost. Welcome to this meeting of Dundee City Council, which is being held remotely and in a hybrid format in terms of Section 43 of the Local Governments in Scotland Act 2003. All members in attendance are able to fully participate in the meeting, which is being live streamed. By participating in the meeting, you are agreeing to being filmed and recorded. Should any member need to leave the meeting for any reason, can they please use the chat to advise of this? If a member loses their connection, they should make every effort to rejoin the meeting, but if this is not possible, the Committee Services Officer will note their absence for the remainder of the meeting. If you have to leave the meeting due to a declaration of interest, you must remain out of the meeting until invited back in. Would all members please mute their microphones when not speaking to avoid background noise and turn off any smart speakers. If you are to be the next speaker, please allow a pause after the last speaker has muted their microphone. If you are joining the meeting remotely, please start when you are speaking. If your connection is poor, you may wish to turn off your computer and see if this improves matters. If this doesn't help, you may wish to quickly leave the meeting and rejoin. If you wish to raise a point of order, ask a question, speak on any item or move a motion or amendment, please use the chat when the relevant item is called. The convener will then invite you to speak. Please do not use the hands up function or intervene in any other way. Would members of the press and public please not post messages in the chat? Where items are for noting or where there has been no disagreement expressed, the convener will call for any member who has a contrary view to indicate this through the chat, otherwise the item will be agreed. Please would members not use the chat for any other purposes, as those joining the meeting by telephone cannot see the chat and therefore will not be able to follow the debate. Although we are operating in a different way, this is still a formal meeting of the Council, and the required standards of behaviour and discussion are the same as in a face-to-face meeting. Standing orders will apply to the proceedings, and the provisions of the Councillors' Code of Conduct will also apply in the usual way. Does any member have any queries regarding these procedures? There are no queries, Lord Provost, so I will now ask the Committee Services Officer to take a roll call for the minute. Thank you.
Thank you very much. As indicated, I will now take a roll call for the minute. I would ask if members would confirm they were present when I call their name. Lord Provost. Councillor Anderson.
Present.
Deputy Lord Provost Cardell.
Present.
Bailey Dawson.
Present.
Thank you. I've received apologies from Councillor Ackler. Councillor Flynn.
Present.
Councillor Hunter.
Present.
Councillor Lynn. Present. Bailey Roberts.
Present.
Councillor Rome.
Present.
Bailey Stores.
Present.
Councillor Short.
Here.
Councillor Smith.
Here.
Councillor Toland.
I am here.
Thank you. Bailey Keenan. Present. Thank you. I've received apologies from Councillor Cruikshank. Councillor Finnegan.
Present.
Councillor McHugh.
Present.
Councillor McKirvin.
Present.
Councillor Scullen.
Present.
Councillor Shears.
Present.
Bailey Wright.
Present.
Bailey McPherson.
Good evening. Present.
And I've received apologies from Councillor Coleman. Councillor Creighton.
Present.
Councillor Duncan.
Here.
Bailey Scott.
Here.
And that concludes the roll call.
Thank you, Willie. Roger, please.
Lord Provost, members of the Council, there are 2 items of business this evening. First of all, item 2, the minutes for information and record purposes.
Any questions? I see nothing, so we'll take that as an acceptance. Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Provost. Item 3, general business. Appointment. Chief Health and Social Care Integration Joint Board. It is reported that the terms of office of the chairperson and vice chairperson of the Dundee City Health and Social Care Integration Joint Board will come to an end at the October meeting of the Integration Joint Board, whereupon the role of chairperson will revert to Dundee City Council as a member of the Integration Joint Board. The Council's instructions are requested with regard to this appointment. For the information of members, the Council's current members on the Integration Joint Board are Councillor Lynn, Councillor Toland and Councillor McHugh.
Thank you, Roger. Looking for nominations.
Lord Provost Bailey Dawson wishes to speak.
Thank you. Bailey Dawson.
Thanks, Lord Provost. Our nomination would be Councillor Lynn.
Councillor Lynn. Are there any other nominations? I see none, so I'll take this as accepted. Thank you. That's City Council. Thank you, everyone.
I'd like to welcome people to the meeting of the Climate, Environment and Biodiversity Committee. If we could ask Arlene to take us through the agenda.
Thanks, Convener. Item 1, Declaration of Interest. Are there any declarations?
See no declarations of interest. So next item.
Item 2, Dundee Local Area Energy Plan. This is for approval.
Okay, so just to introduce the Local Area Energy Plan, a substantial document. I don't think there's a word wasted in it. It basically highlights the nature, scale, rate and timing of the work that the whole of the city needs to do to actually reach the net zero target by 2045. It looks at demand and supply across the whole city. It takes all of the targets that have been set and calculates what we need to do to achieve them. So, for example, Dundee's got 77,485 domestic properties. 53% of them are flats, 31% of them are in the social rented sector, and 18% of them are in the private rented sector. And 50% of all those properties are currently rated EPC D and G. The target basically says that by 2033, we should have all the private properties in Dundee up to EPC C. That means that 56% of the private properties in Dundee need some form of intervention. In terms of social housing, we have to reach EPC B by 2032. That means 92% of our social housing stock needs an intervention. And the scale of the work at hand is to move 87% of our properties currently on the gas supply to a decarbonised form of heating. The report also identifies that 555 million miles were driven by cars in 2021. And vehicles, 71% of those miles were driven by cars and only 1% of them are electric. So the scale of the work is significant. There were 4 potential scenarios explored, and the local resilience model is the one that is the only one that is seen as being feasible for hitting the target. It requires us to improve energy efficiency, decarbonise heat, maximise PV and storage, ensure network resilience and decarbonise transport. So the long-term delivery plan is detailed here through to 2045 with 10 medium-term actions. So I'm happy to take questions. Now I can see Michael Crichton first. Councillor Crichton first.
Thank you, Convener. This is a really useful update for committee on policy, strategy and deployment modelling for the local area plan. I note the comments under 3 that say financial implications, and I agree with the comments, to be fair, around the goals will be financially challenging. I'm just wondering if I could ask a question to officers around engagement with the Scottish and UK governments around obtaining the funding mechanisms. I know it will be hard, but just wondering what conversations have been had or planned to be.
Yeah, as you will see that one of the recommendation C, is to be in robust dialogue with both the Scottish Government and the UK Government about finance. I'm wondering if Mr. Press would like to come in. Thank you.
My apologies. Thank you for the question, Councillor Crichton. I think it's at the heart of this matter. We set out very clearly, as the convener said, that objective under the local resilience target of getting to carbon neutral by the date set out in the report. I think we need to be very honest and open with the members of the public. This is an aspiration, but it is entirely dependent on funding. And some of that will be the council's own resources. Much of it requires external funding, and that way it may well be from Scottish Government, may well be from UK Government, or maybe from the private sector, or crucially domestic residents, owner-occupiers, etc. So there is a very challenging journey to this. We speak regularly to both UK Government and Scottish Government. We bid for bid funds which do emerge, and we will continue to do so. I think it's important to emphasise the primary contact is through the climate change teams at Scottish and UK government. It is particularly important that we engage across both governments, because it isn't simply climate change teams and the limited budgets that they have. I know that council housing colleagues have been very active over the years in securing funding to do external wall insulation, decarbonisation of heating, etc. And I think that will continue. We've been effective as a service in attracting transport funding to decarbonise the fleet. And again, that will continue. There are obviously significant opportunities in economic development, skills and employability to attract people into the growing jobs in this sector, and we'll continue to do that. So I think it's a good challenge. It's a good reminder that we need to stay focused on that, and we need to be focused across all parts of both governments, not just the limited resources that the climate change teams have to bring to bear.
Councillor Crichton, are you happy with that response?
Yeah, thank you. We just had a chat within our group, and we wanted just a bit of clarity, and we realised we don't want to be exposed financially as a city council, but we obviously want and aspire with these goals. I think we all do across the chamber. So thank you for clarity, Mr. President.
Yeah, and I also think one of the things that's increasingly unavoidably obvious is we have to decouple the price of electric from the price of gas. And that has to happen at a European level, because one of the things that's the biggest obstacle is we're producing renewable energy, but we're being charged the gas price. And that's making many of these interventions difficult for our tenants. So it's something we're acutely aware of. I can see Councillor Shears has withdrawn his question. Bailey Scott.
Thank you. Can I ask if the dedicated LAEP officer is going to be a new post adding to the council headcount, or will it be filled by an existing member of staff?
It is my understanding that it is one post within the 5 staff member team. The majority of the functions delivered by the team are the statutory functions of the council, which include the LHES. And the LEAP that we're considering tonight is non-statutory. But to give you an example of how effective council officers have been in securing external funding for these non-statutory areas, the document you see before us was sponsored by Scottish and Southern Energy. And I think that's immensely important that we've, through the auspices of the Climate Change Partnership, we have attracted that funding to allow what is quite a large document, a very expensive document to produce, that has been funded through SSEN. And I think that demonstrates that although perhaps one of that 5-person team is non-statutory, it really demonstrates the benefit that you have of being able to partner with external sponsors and the two governmental agencies around issues such as this.
Thank you.
Really, Scott. And I think we also attracted funding to support the employment of that person as well from 150,000. I have a question from Councillor Short.
Thank you, Convener. My question is really around page 62, and it's the upgrades that are being looked across the city. And Constable Street, which caused a little bit of consternation at the beginning of the year because that was the start of the work that led up Albert Street. But I'm surprised that we've not indicated the work that's happening for the electrification of the rail and the Stanner Gate, which is actually Dock Street, SSEN project. It's currently CBRE are selling the land. Is that something that doesn't fit into this scope, or is it just an oversight? Please.
Sorry, if I could cut. I mean, my understanding would be that work is ongoing, whereas this report is identifying key interventions in the future. But I'll let Mr. Presswood come in.
I think it's particularly important to pick up the points made about electrification of rail. It's a very longer term project. I think what we're finding is that Network Rail now require us to ensure that any bridges that are being created are required to be of sufficient height to accommodate future electrification of rail. But other than high level feasibility, there hasn't been any tangible capital funding or timetable set for that. So I think it is longer term, it's aspirational. And in terms of the other ones, perhaps we could pick that up offline and I'll confirm whether they should have been included or whether they would be picked up as part of another document.
Yeah, I think that'd be great. I'll appreciate that, and I'll send that over to you, Robin, so you've got that available.
So we're being asked to approve the LEAP as submitted to you, to also approve the fact that Dundee Climate Leadership Group is leading on the governance of this implementation. That's because Dundee Climate Leadership Group covers the whole of the city, involves the NHS, utility companies, the universities, and note that we will be maintaining dialogue with the UK government and the Scottish government on funding. Are people happy with those recommendations? I see no dissent, so that's approved. Arlene, next.
That takes us on to item 3, which is extension of emissions trading scheme to include energy from waste, and this is for noting.
Okay, so this report, essentially, there was the UK emissions trading scheme established in January 2021. In July 2023, they confirmed an intention to include waste incineration and energy from waste emissions as part of, would have to be paid for carbon emissions. The proposals state that by 2026, there'll be a 2-year transition period, and from 2028, the energy from waste will be included in terms of a carbon payment. The problem for us is that means those charges can be handed on to the council, although we have no direct responsibility for, we have, if someone leaves a sofa with fossil fuel materials in it, we have to pick it up and dispose of it. So the negotiations at the moment are about the scale of those charges and the extra burden it may place on the local authority. So the concept is basically to be noted. There are many areas in this consultation where we have said that there's no comment, and my understanding is not answered. Sorry, my understanding is that's because that was entirely about the operator, not about our role. I just want to check if Mr. Devine would like to come in and add anything extra.
No, I think it covers that well, Convener. I think it's just to obviously underline to state where the fossil fuel element of that is, because that's where the charge will be specifically for.
So we're also contributing to COSLA's negotiations on this to make sure that local authorities aren't hit with the charge. So that was just for noting. Are people happy? That okay? Who has it? Oh, sorry. Councillor Short. Sorry, Bailey McPherson. Sorry, Bailey.
Thank you. I have a question regarding the recommendations. It indicates that we're being asked to note the content of the report. It doesn't ask us to agree the response. Now, I'm assuming that is because the closing date of the response, as I understand it, in fact, 1.1 indicates it's a response to the UK government's recent consultation, but my understanding is it was actually a joint consultation between the UK government, the Scottish and Welsh governments, and the Northern Ireland Department of Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs. And if I've understood the position correctly, that consultation originally was to close in July, was extended but closed on the 2nd of August. So I'm assuming, therefore, that the consultation response has actually been submitted in the name of the council, but the report doesn't actually quite say that. So can I just have clarification? We are not being asked tonight to agree the consultation response, but just to note what has been submitted.
Billy McPherson, that's my understanding. I'll just check with Mr Devine that my understanding it's been submitted, so it's for noting.
Thank you. Yes, I can concur with that. That was it was submitted, but it wasn't asked for approval from the council.
Could I come back on that? Yeah, could I come back on that? Because my point fundamentally is one would have expected, therefore, that the convener's approval process would have been used for an urgent item, but wasn't. And I'm just really wondering, because at the end of the day, this is Dundee City Council's response. Now, I have no problem with the response, and I understand entirely the point you've made about why there are questions that are either no response or not answered. I understand that completely. But I'm just really wondering why, often with an urgent matter, the convener's approval process is used. In fact, we had one on an entirely different matter submitted to convener and group spokespeople this very afternoon. And I'm just really wondering how we can submit something in the name of the council when it's never actually gone before elected members for approval, and why the convener's approval process wasn't really used in this instance.
I don't know, would that be Mr Many who would respond to that? Or?
Thank you, convener. In all the circumstances, it's clear that the response that's been submitted has been submitted not by Dundee City Council, but by the officers of Dundee City Council. But I understand the point that Bailey McPherson has raised, and I would suggest that that's something that officers could discuss with elected members so that we have a procedure that everyone can feel comfortable with going forward.
I'm grateful to Mr Many for that. I think my point really is that we have to have a degree of consistency on these things. Now, as I say, I have absolutely no problem with what actually has been submitted, and I appreciate the timescales involved. But I think elected members have been pretty good at turning around convener approval process reports, because I think we do realise the urgency of some of these responses. And I would make the point that in 1.1 it does actually refer to Dundee City Council's response to the UK, well, to the consultation. But I'm grateful for Mr Many's response, and clearly we'll be able to discuss this further as elected members with officers in due course. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Bailey McPherson. I appreciate your comments, because I had similar views when we submitted the response to the adaptation consultation, because I felt we could have put more in there on behalf of the city. But Councillor Short.
Thank you, convener. I recently heard a briefing from the Director of the Climate of Local Partnerships, and it was about the whole ETS system going forwards. And I just wondered if there was perhaps some scope for a briefing to be delivered to all of us with regards to just how difficult it's going to get further down the line as more and more of these fines come in place, basically, because from what I heard at that briefing, it can get really, really quite complicated and can be quite expensive if we're not putting forward waste that hasn't been broken down into its competent areas. Is that something that can be organised, please?
Yeah, Councillor Shaw. I mean, part of the issue at the moment is we don't have any detail on costs. But I'm sure that Mr Devine's team would be happy to do something once we've got something more concrete.
Thanks, Councillor Shaw. Thanks, convener. Yes, the Executive Director for Neighbourhood Services has asked us to start to work towards providing a briefing for elected members when more details come forward.
I believe that's our business for this evening, so I'll hand on to the next committee. Thank you.
Good evening and welcome to the Fair Work, Economic Growth and Infrastructure Committee. Can we have the first item, please, Arlen?
Thanks, Convener. Item 1, declaration of interest. Are there any declarations?
Councillor Dawson, you've got declaration non-financial. Do you want to come and explain that? Or?
Yeah, thanks, Convener. Yeah, in relation to the item relating to the Caird Hall, whilst it's the facade that's being enhanced on that, but as Leisure and Culture are obviously the operator of the Caird Hall, I thought it best would be just to declare a non-financial for this one.
Thanks, Councillor Dawson. Chair, that's taken as read. Councillor Shears as well, please.
Thanks very much. It's for item 8, which is my employer, and it could be directly affected. So if there's any discussion, I'll leave the meeting.
Thank you, Councillor. Next item, please, Arlen.
Item 2, environmental improvement works 2024 to 25, and this is for approval.
Thank you. I believe we've got Catherine Conway here who can answer questions on items 2 and hopefully 3 as well. The first question, I believe, is Bailey McPherson.
Thanks, Convener. It's in relation to the allotment security tender, and specifically in relation to the Ancram allotments. Whilst the provision of the new security gate is welcome, the concerns that have been raised with me by allotment holders are really around the council's maintenance of the allotments, and in particular the fact that there have been unused empty plots not being relet despite a large waiting list, and some unmanaged plots that have been left to grow wild with really high weeds. Now, I raised this tonight because I did raise that issue directly with officers recently and was told that there were IT teething problems and that that neighbourhood services were working with IT to resolve these. My question really is that if we're having this improvement in relation to the security, can I have some assurance as to how quickly the IT teething problems in relation to the letting of allotment plots is going to take? In other words, when are we going to, given the length of the waiting list, not just here but other allotments as well, when is that actually going to be resolved so that we can ensure that we don't have unused empty plots across our allotments given the large waiting list in the city?
Thank you, Bailey McPherson. Catherine, can you answer that, please?
Thank you, Convener. Thank you, Bailey McPherson, for your question. Yes, as you alluded to, we've recently moved the management of allotment plots to bespoke IT systems. So we are working with IT officers to resolve those teething problems. I will undertake to provide you with a timescale. If you could leave that with me, I'll come back to you off table. But we are hoping to be able to offer out the vacant plots at Ancram, but also at allotments across the city in the near future.
That's appreciated, and I'll just wait to hear further from Catherine in due course. Thank you.
Thank you, Bailey McPherson. Councillor McHugh, please.
Thank you. With regard to the resurfacing at Templeton Woods car park, I understand this car park was resurfaced in 2023. The work was finished in September 2023. That's a year ago. And I wonder why it's necessary to spend another £90,000 to repeat that work that was done a year ago.
Thank you, Councillor McHugh. I don't know if Mr McNaughton is able to answer that or if that's again one for Catherine, but Ewan, perhaps?
I'll ask my colleague Catherine if she can answer that one.
Thank you, Convener. Thank you, Councillor McHugh. I think there's some confusion. There's been kind of repairs ongoing, but not a substantial resurfacing, which is what this project will be taking forward.
You would be like, yes.
This was raised with me by a community group who are active in the area. And the car park apparently was closed off for 2 or 3 weeks, August, September of last year, for resurfacing. This community group didn't think a very good job was done and raised complaints at the time, and now they've raised with me the fact that another £90,000. I'd be interested to have some detail of what work was done last year. That's possible.
I'm sure we could take that offline and get those answers for you, Councillor McHugh. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bailey Keenan, please.
Similar type question, because I recall that the car park at Templeton Woods was done a time ago. Wouldn't necessarily put the 23 date on it that Councillor McHugh's been able to do. But it does seem a short period of time ago. So I'm really wondering, given that we're spending another £90,000, whether we should have been putting something that's more substantial and that would last a period of time, rather than a few vehicles full of light gravel or whatever was used. So wondering whether we're actually revisiting things because we're no building longevity into it.
I appreciate your concerns, Bailey Keane, and I'm sure we'd all be worried about things that would get replaced within a short period of time, but I'm sure Catherine can give those answers to Councillor McHugh as well, as agreed. And my apologies, Councillor Anderson, because I skipped you, so if you can come in now, please.
So thank you. It was just to welcome this range of work. My committee can't consider tenders, but it's good to see this work coming up to this committee, and particularly pleased for the little bit of work that's going to support the Duddock Park path. Speaking to the Friends of Duddock Park this afternoon, and they're chuffed. So hopefully we'll approve this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. With those comments being said, can this be approved? Great, thank you. Next item, please, Alan.
Item 3, food waste treatment procurement sourcing strategy. This is for approval.
Councillor Duncan.
Thanks, Convener. Just a quick question. I hope the contract is estimated to be £150,000. Can I just ask what income is derived from food waste recycling, and also what is the percentage take up of food recycling in terms of households participating in the food recycling programme?
Thank you, Councillor Duncan. I'll bring in Catherine again. She might need to get offline with you, but Catherine.
Thank you, Convener. I'll maybe pass it over to Mr. Devine, my colleague. Thanks.
Well, thanks, Catherine. Thanks, Convener. I don't have that detail to hand at the moment, but I'm quite happy to provide that out with this meeting, if that's okay.
Yeah, more than happy with that. Maybe you could share that to all members. Thanks.
Thank you to the resident, Mr. Duncan. Thank you. Can that then be noted? Thank you. Next item, please, Arlen.
Item 4, Donalds Lane and Petalpin Street, stripping up of roads and footways orders 2024. This is for approval.
So this item is seeking approval to stop at lengths of road and footways in Donalds Lane and Petalpin Street to enable development following planning consent for new housing. And the first one we've got is Councillor Sculling, please.
Mr. McNaughton will be aware of the problems with pavement parking and traffic in this area already. So I was just wondering how this will be looked at, just to make sure that it's not adding to the pressures already in this area.
Thank you. Mr. McNaughton.
Thank you, Convener. The final arrangements for the new housing development, which is going to end this location, was approved by Planning Committee and did detail the parking arrangements. There was some discussion at that committee about parking and also the standards for new housing developments, but it did receive planning permission at the time.
Thank you. Are you happy with that response, Councillor Sculling? Yes, thank you. Could that then be noted? Thank you. Next item, please.
Item 5, disabled persons parking places. This is for approval.
So this item provides an update on disabled bay installations and removals over the last 12 months and requests approval to vary the relevant traffic regulation order to confirm these changes. Are there any questions on this? Don't see any. Can this be approved? Oh, Councillor Dawson, please.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. Well, not directly relevant. I just wonder, obviously there was questions in relation to road markings recently, which were answered by officers. Has obviously these markings for disabled persons parking bays have a revenue cost for us on an annual basis. I wonder if Mr. McNaughton or others can basically say to us if there's any thought being given to changing the way that these are marked in relation to, I think the LEZ was mentioned with a newer type material, so we're not necessarily having to redo them as often, because I know one of the things that I'm going to have to report in a little while is a lot of the markings that are coming off, which makes it difficult for people to actually realise there's a disabled parking bay in place. But I'm just wondering if there's been any thought given relation to the way that these are marked on the road. And again, apologies, convener, not directly relevant. It was just something I thought of.
No, I appreciate that, Councillor Dawson. Mr. McNaughton, can you advise?
Yeah, thank you, convener. The markings are done in our standard thermoplastic screed material, which we do the majority of our road markings in. The LEZ gateway markings were slightly different due to A, their size, and B, their prominent location at access turning points, which received greater wear. So for the location of the disabled bays being in channels of residential streets predominantly, they're not subject to the same aggressive traffic manoeuvres on top of them. In terms of the revenue, the disabled bays are funded from the on-street parking account rather than our general revenue fund. And again, a secondary consideration to it is that, as noted in the report, while we've got a number of new disabled parking bays being put in, there's also a number of removals as well. So the current material that we're using provides the optimum solution for the type of markings that we're installing.
Yeah, many thanks, Mr. McNaughton. It's just I do see them coming out wearing away quite quickly and regularly. So I was just wondering if any thought or consideration had been given to actually changing that, because it would kind of make more sense for the users of these bays if they were able to be seen. Because I take your point, they're in channels and it's less use, but it's also slow use in vehicles manoeuvring into these channels and manoeuvring over the bays, which does wear them down quite quickly. So as I say, if consideration could be given to changing them, I don't know if that would help your off-street parking budget as well, but yeah, thanks anyway.
Thanks, Councillor Dawson. This being said, can this be agreed? Thank you. Next one, please, Alan.
Yeah, that takes us on to item 6, sourcing strategies by Head of Design and Property, and this is for approval.
You can see that there is I've got Bailey first of all. I believe you have an amendment seconded by Councillor Duncan. Maybe just give it a minute. I'm not seeing any other questions. So, okay, Bailey McPherson, on you go.
Okay, thanks. And I'd be grateful if committee services could distribute the amendment, which is very straightforward. And I'll just cut to the chase. In terms of consistency, because our group have taken the consistent line that procurement outcomes that are above 200,000 should be determined at committee and not delegated to officers. We think there should be a lower level than is currently recommended by officers of 500,000. But we accept the point that small, quite frankly, five-figure figures and up to 200,000 can be retained at a delegated level. But in terms of consistency, because we've said it before and we'll say it again, 200,000 in our opinion is a reasonable limit. So it's a very minor change to the recommendation at paragraph 2, and I recommend that to committee, and I think Councillor Duncan will second me. Thank you, convener.
Thank you, Bailey McPherson. Councillor Duncan, do you want to come in at this point?
Yeah, just briefly. I mean, I think what we're asking for is perfectly reasonable. It's certainly consistent, as Bailey McPherson has said, with what we've said previously. And I think members of the public would expect us all to exercise a good degree of scrutiny. So on that basis, happy to second.
Thanks for that, Councillor Duncan. Because we've had this discussion before, I'm not going to go into a great deal of detail. I'm going to be moving the report as is. And I don't see another question on the item. Do you have a seconder for this?
I'll second.
Thank you. We'll move straight to the vote then, please.
Thanks, convener. The motion by the convener, seconded by Councillor Toland, is approval of the report as circulated. The amendment by Bailey McPherson, seconded by Councillor Duncan, is as circulated. Convener.
Motion.
Councillor Anderson.
Motion.
Lord Provost.
Motion.
Deputy Lord Provost.
Motion.
Bailey Dawson.
The motion.
Councillor Flynn.
Motion.
Councillor Hunter.
Motion.
Councillor Lynn.
Motion.
Bailey Roberts.
Motion.
Bailey Sawers.
Motion.
Councillor Short.
Motion, please.
Councillor Smith.
Motion.
Councillor Toland.
Motion.
Bailey Keenan.
Amendment.
Councillor Finnegan.
Amendment.
Councillor McHugh.
Amendment.
Councillor McKirvan. Councillor Scullen.
Amendment.
Councillor Shears.
Amendment.
Bailey Wright.
Amendment.
Bailey McPherson.
The amendment.
Councillor Crichton.
The amendment.
Councillor Duncan.
Amendment.
Bailey Scott. So that's 13 for the motion, 11 for the amendment, so the motion is carried.
Thank you. Can we move to the next item, please?
That takes us on to item 7, tenders received by Head of Design and Property, and this is for approval.
So this item is seeking approval to accept the tenders for the design, supply and installation of new play equipment in the East End, North East and Lockheed wards, which I hope will be welcomed by all. I'm just looking. I see that Councillor Anderson has withdrawn her amendment, withdrawn her comment, sorry. I don't see any other comments on this item, so can this be agreed? Thank you. Next item, please.
That takes us to the confidential part of the agenda. Do you wish to deal with this in the usual way?
Members happy to deal with this in the usual manner? Yes, thank you. That's the end of the Fair Work, Economic Growth and Infrastructure Committee.
I think everybody's settled. Willie, please.
Okay, thank you very much, Convener. Firstly, are there any declarations of interest?
See Bailey Dawson.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. Item 6 on your agenda in relation to leisure management software, non-financial in relation to Leisure and Culture Dundee, please.
Yeah, we'll take that as read. Anybody else online, we'll see. No one else? Move on, Willie, please.
Okay, thank you very much. Takes you on to item 2, capital expenditure and monitoring report. This is for noting.
Just go straight to questions. Councillor Duncan, please.
Yep, thanks, Convener. My question's around on page 11. Both the DCA plant replacement and the Bell Street low carbon transport project have been budgeted expenditure against them for 2024 to 25. But in both cases, the narrative is that tenders are yet to be approved. I just really looking to officers, could they be updated as to where we are in the tender process and the timescales? Thanks.
Okay, Mr. Nemeth, please.
Apologies, Convener. I don't have that detail, but Mr. Presswood or Mr. Martin may be able to help with the timing of the tender process.
Thank you. Mr. Presswood, will you be able to answer the question, or any of your officers? Or can we come back to raise the point with them? You're happy if we come back to you directly, Councillor Duncan?
Yeah, I'm more than happy for that. Thanks.
Thank you. I see no further questions, so I'll take the report as agreed. Thank you. Willie, please.
Okay, thanks. Takes you on to item 3, revenue monitoring report. This is for noting.
Thank you. Bailey McPherson, please.
Thanks. I have a question in relation to 3.1, but could I firstly say that whilst the recording of votes is definitely better than it has been since the hybrid arrangement started. It's less than perfect, and to be frank, I couldn't hear how Bailey Scott voted in the last division that just took place. I can work out how he did, but purely by the arithmetic at the end. I shouldn't have to work out the arithmetic at the end. So I just leave that with the Chief Executive and officers to see if we can find a bit of a solution on that. My question's about...
just to say, I think the Chief Executive take on board, and I think we clearly heard Bailey Scott when he made his vote on the night. You may numbers. Thank you.
Yeah, but you may have, I didn't. And the fact is that it is important
it's been noted.
that everyone... yeah, and there's no need to interrupt me like that. So I come to my question, and it's regarding COVID recovery measures, an opening balance of 405,000 on the 1st of April, and the projected balance at the end of March 2025 is still 405,000. Could I perhaps ask officers what is actually intended to be done with regard to that? Obviously, thankfully, the brunt of the pandemic is long past us, and we still have, something slightly south of £500,000 sitting as a balance for COVID recovery measures. And we'd just be grateful for some indication as to what the intentions long term are in regard to that.
Mr. Emmett, sorry, Paul, will you take that, please? Thanks.
David McPherson, thank you for the question. Can I ask that I take that information away and come back to all members of the committee separately with some detail in terms of that specific reserve, in terms of how it's likely to be used?
Yeah, I have no problem with that. Thank you.
Thank you. I see no further questions or comments, so we'll take that as agreed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Takes you on to item 4, Corporate Services Service Plan Progress Report. This is for noting.
Nice. Councillor Duncan, you were first.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. Just a brief question regarding page 39. It's reported that in 2023-24, in-year NDR collection levels had dropped by 1.25%. Could officers indicate the situation in terms of collection level in the current financial year to date?
Mr. Emmett, please.
Thank you, Convener. So in relation to the year-end position, part of the problem we have with collection is when there are changes to the valuation roll at the end of the year, which can affect how much is collected. This year's collection is broadly on track with previous years. I don't have the figures to hand, Councillor, but I'm happy to circulate a comparison with this year and last year's collections at this point in the year to members.
Thank you. If you pass on all to members, that'd be helpful. So that's your question.
I'm more than happy with that, Convener. And yeah, as you say, to all members would be handy. Thanks.
Yeah, it's been agreed. Thank you. Bailey Scott, please.
I'd like some information, please, about the working days lost per full-time equivalent on page 41. 17.5 days does seem to be quite high, and it's grown since last year. And I realise this is just a snapshot from March, but I wondered if officers have any indication as what might be driving up that sickness absence, because I would have thought with hybrid working, that would actually see a reduction in sickness absence rather than an increase. And it would also be useful if we could have those figures broken down further so that we know what element of that is for long-term absence and what part of it is for repeated short-term absence. And that would give me a better idea of where the problem actually lies that we need to be tackling. And finally, Convener, in June, the council recruited 3 posts, 2 for an attendance support advisor and 1 for a health and wellness advisor, both on grade 8, which is a reasonable salary. So I just wondered what impact they've had already and what their success will be measured by. Will it be bringing the figure down to target or less than target?
Thank you for the questions. So, Mr. Emmett, please, and hopefully you'll answer them all.
So, thank you, Convener. So this has been a big focus of area for the council leadership team, looking at how we manage sickness, which has, as you point out, Bailey Scott, continued to rise. Starting at the end of your questions, the officers to help with attendance have just started their work, and we're happy to report back in due course how that work is going. That's only just started, and what we have done there is focus on the areas where we are seeing some of the highest levels of sickness across the services, so particularly in construction, in social work services and in early years, to focus on that. We've done some work looking at hybrid working, and there's no that's helped, I suppose, in that part of the business. What we've seen is that sickness absence in those areas where we're focusing attendance has continued to rise. And I'll provide members of the committee, I'll provide to all members a breakdown of the analysis between long-term and short-term sickness.
To answer your question, Bill Scott? Yeah, thank you. Councillor McHugh, please.
Thank you. I was pleased to note under the gender pay gap that it's 1.15% in favour of women. Very happy about that. Is there any update on the impending equal pay claim that we might be expecting in the near future?
Pass it over to Mr. Menny in the first instance, please.
Thank you, Convener. Given that this is ongoing litigation, it'd be inappropriate for me to say a great deal in public, but I can say that the group leaders are being kept updated as the equal pay claims progress through the tribunal.
Would you like a second question? I see you have a second question.
Did have another question. It was in relation to absence, but I think Robert's answered what I was wondering about.
Okay, thank you. Bailey Kieran, please.
Yeah, I think I've asked a similar question in relation to absence as well before, given that this continues to grow. And it concerns me that we've now got a workforce in peak condition that has that level of time off. Do we know, having worked with our health partners, how many of our employees are affected by waiting on treatment and health service at the moment? I know that obviously the health service struggle a great deal to get their own staff back that might well be off on long-term sickness. Given the state of health and the health service in Scotland, do we have any figures for the employees of Dundee City Council that may be waiting on a procedure within health?
I wasn't sure I'll be able to answer that. Well, Mr. Emmett.
I'm happy to go in and have a look at that, Convener, and Billy Keenan. I don't think we'll record necessarily specifically that someone's off because they're waiting for treatment, but that information might be available with a bit of digging into the system. So I'll have a look and see if we can provide anything helpful for members on that.
Thanks for that. I see no further question or comments, so we'll take that as agreed. Willie, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. That now takes you on to item 5, Equal Salary Sacrifice Employee Benefit Scheme. You're asked to agree the proposals.
Any questions or comments on the Vehicle Sacrifice Scheme? I don't see any, so we'll take that as agreed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The remaining item, item 6, Leisure Management Software. Again, you're asked to agree the recommendations.
Again, no questions or comments, so we'll take that as agreed. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. That's all the business.
Thank you very much, everyone. That's business for Council. Thank you. Have a good night.
Good night.